Last night, the finale for Justified City Primeval aired, and I wanted to share my quick thoughts on it. If you were able to check it out, let me know what you thought about it down below in the comments section. Now, if you don't know, Justified City Primeval is a continuation of the TV show Justified that started airing, I don't know, about 13 years back, with Timothy Olyphant as Raylan Givens, and essentially it's a modern-day Western type story based off some writing from Elmore Leonard. City Primeval is a different story from Elmore Leonard that actually didn't star the Raylan Givens character, but they decided to adapt this other Elmore Leonard project to be now another story for Raylan Givens, and thus a justified continuation. And even in the process of trying to adapt this, Quentin Tarantino was involved at times, and maybe he would be involved in the process. Maybe he wanted to do his own adaptation. In the end, he wasn't a part of it, but there are some other connections to Quentin Tarantino. His movie Jackie Brown was an adaptation of a Elmore Leonard story. And so there's a bunch of interesting little details in the way some of these things are connected. Even one of the side characters in Justified City Primeval is a character from the movie Out of Sight from 25 years ago. And they got the same actor who is in Out of Sight to play the character in this show. And in City Primeval, the book, the story from Elmore Leonard, that character was the lead character of the story. So there's a bunch of interesting background when it comes to this specific project and Elmore Leonard adaptations and all of that fun stuff. But frustrating thing in all of this is Justified is a series that I thoroughly enjoyed, but I've never watched all of it. Essentially, the way the universe played out is back during its original run, I watched a good bit of it, but I didn't have cable. So it was like, buying seasons afterwards and stuff like that. And so there's big gaps between when I'd watch one section and then when I'd be able to watch the next season. And by the time it got into the later section, I'd started my YouTube channel. I was very busy doing things here. And so in order to watch the last seasons, I felt like I needed to rewatch everything up to that point in time. I was hoping with City Primeval that I'd be able to have that as my opportunity to rewatch the entire show and do a ranking, but there's a lot of things I've had to watch this year, so that didn't end up happening. But this is one of these shows that my wife and I have always enjoyed, loved Timothy Olyphant as Raylan Givens, and just the general vibe aesthetic that they go for, that, you get your modern day Western, a little bit of like very dry humor, and just very much our sort of thing. And when they announced we're doing a revival, I was very interested in checking it out. So we have been watching it over the last month or so, and both my wife and I really had a good time with it. It felt like they were able to bring the show back without in any way harming the legacy of what they did before, undoing anything there, but telling a new story that feels very different. Whereas all of the original run is so Kentucky focused, and this is set in Detroit, you get a very different vibe, but it's the same type of storytelling. You have that Elmore Leonard story basis of the way certain things are constructed. You have the same lead character, but because it's a different city, and in each of these stories, whether the original run or this new one, the location is so much of a character of the specific nature of corruption in Harlan, Kentucky versus Detroit. It's very different, has a different vibe to it of how organized or disorganized crime takes place in each of these places. But there's parallels, there's similarities, and then you have Raylan Givens in the center of the story. And Timothy Olyphant has not skipped a beat. Doesn't feel like he's lost anything in the time that's passed. He's just so good in this part with just having these very subtle, dry line deliveries that are so funny, and be able to just be very polite while being firm and strong with people. And so you just get all the classic kind of things that you want. Maybe I would have liked to have seen him shoot more people, but at the same time, it makes it so when he does do his quick draws, when it does happen that he has to use his gun, it like has that much more potency to it, of it really matters when he did it. And it feels also like you have a much older, more mature version of the character that especially compared to where the opening of the first movie came from, or not movie, first episode of the first season, where that kicks off and what he does there versus kind of a more reserved father who thinks very differently about all these things, but he's still that same guy. He still has that in him. And so you get to see all of that. And then I think kind of one of the things they've really did well in the first run as well as here is casting just the right person to be clashing with our lead character. So, of course, it was Walton Goggins in the original run, who was just fantastic as Boyd Crowder and so fun. And there's just a great dynamic between the two of them. Here we get Boyd Holbrook in that kind of role. And this is the type of role Boyd Holbrook is just meant to play, of just this like very charming psycho that is so dangerous, is so selfish, is so just like out there, but he's having so much fun doing all of it and toying with people that is fun to have him on screen. And where after the last decade, you probably don't want to have Raylan Givens being this trigger happy cop in Detroit gunning a lot of people down. That probably wouldn't play too well. And so they're able to fill in that gap of the body count with our villain to the show doing a bunch of violent acts and mafias and things like that kind of thrown in there. So they add into it. The nature of the story is kind of the corruption in Detroit, everything kind of going on in there, and how Boyd Holbrook's character kind of comes into it and is taking advantage of all the corruption. And Raylan is kind of stuck there trying to unravel this nest of things going on. And there's people he makes friends with, and you don't know which person is in the middle of this nest tied to a judge that ends up dying. And there's all, like, everything is corrupt. But what type of corruption? How are they corrupt? Is it corrupt for selfish reasons? Is it corrupt in the sense that they're trying to stop worse corruption? There's all these kind of things that you're trying to unpack in all of it that just I thoroughly enjoyed. There were some things that made this story a little bit odd. With the nature of the story, by the end of it, you really get where it's going, that it's actually about the corruption and this specific book that's kind of a MacGuffin that once you realize that's what the story's about, it clears up. But in the first half, it kind of plays out a little bit like the audience is ahead of the investigation. So Raylan's trying to figure out who did something and why. The audience saw what happened. And so there's no mystery there. It's that guy right there. And very quickly, our hero figures that out too. And so before kind of the stuff about the book really kicks in, it plays a little bit odd, has a bit of a strange flow to it of like, okay, I'm digging spending time in this world with these characters, but the guy's right there. We already know what's going to be the rest of the season. So maybe there would have been a way to make it clearer what the focus was earlier in the season. Other kind of thoughts on it. The finale, just in case someone hasn't seen it yet, I won't go into specific spoilers, but it has a very extended epilogue that by the time you get to the last scene, you get exactly what they were going for and how they're trying to have either a satisfying finale or tease the future. It does both, and I thought it did a really good job of being like, oh, that does work. Either way you want to go, you did it right there. You could, okay, that was smart. That was pretty clever. But also with what they do with this extended finale, it makes it feel like, well, the bookends of the show are where you can feel them forcing Raylan Givens into a story he wasn't originally in. Back to what I said earlier, City Primeval is not a Raylan Givens story. It is not a Justified follow-up or Hole in the Wall or Fire in the Hole follow-up. It's its own thing with its own lead character. They took the story and they put the lead character of Justified into it. But it is the follow-up to Justified. And so there's all those ways in which you can tell they have to have connective tissue backwards. You have to follow up on plot points from the show, characters from the show. And it would just like, if you didn't do, what's this person up to? What's happened here? People will be frustrated. It's like, why did we bring this all back if we're only going to follow one character? And so it feels very much like they bookend forcing in that stuff. Like they have to do that stuff. Which I dug it. I wanted that. I wish there was a more organic way to do it that didn't feel so obvious what they were doing. Because like you get to even the arc that they're doing with Givens where they try and close out in the last 15 or so minutes what kind of goes on there. That doesn't feel like the actual ultimate culmination of what the show was about. It's not detached. It's not like, where did that come from? It's in there. But it doesn't feel like that's what all this was building towards. Of course, that's dramatically what we were doing with this character. It's not entirely obvious that is what this is building towards. But they're not just trying to close out City Primeval. They're trying to close out Justified. Or are they at the same time? The specific way they ended, I think, was actually quite clever. I really did like the last thing that they did there because that was smart of them. So if it could have been more organic and integrating all of it, I don't know what that would have looked like, though. There's not a natural way to do it. So maybe that's just the compromise, the conceit that was required in order to put Raylan Givens into the story, which I'm glad they did because I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed getting to see him again. And I mean, I think they did do a nice little way to close this out. So as for me, I really enjoyed it. I don't know that I'd be like, wow, top amazing television. I don't know of anything like that, but it's like, what do I think is like a good show that like my wife and I just enjoy putting on and watching? That's what this is. Just good old fashioned modern day Western, little action, little comedy, little romance, some conspiracy, a little mystery, and lively characters. I think that's what Elmore Leonard does really well, and so why so many of his pieces have been adapted. He just has these characters that really pop, that are fun to watch on the screen, and this Justified series has done a great job of casting them and thus bringing them to life. So I very much appreciated that we got a little bit more Raylan Givens. I've said it many times before. I love getting to see characters at different phases of life. And that's what we got to do with this character of jumping forward. Oh, actually, it jumps forward quite a few more years than actually passed. So they have very much this aging Raylan Givens, and whose life is in kind of a different place. But also, maybe I hadn't even thought about this till this exact moment, but not really in any way presenting him as like run down, more cynical. He's always cynical. He's, if anything, much healthier, more of a balanced, stable person than before. And that was just nice to see, bringing back a hero without needing to deconstruct them, humiliate them, or show them as like a depressing loser. It doesn't do any of those things. You get to bring him back and make him the hero one more time as the guy that sees what's going on, that he's willing to pull out his gun and shoot people. He's not opposed to that at all. But he also isn't corrupt. He's like a good, decent cop. So I enjoyed it. How about you guys? Anyone else check it out? I haven't seen anyone talking about this. I don't know what the general reception is to it. I haven't seen a bunch of reviews. I haven't seen chat or on Twitter. And that's almost why I wanted to talk about it, to have someone put out a review about it. But I enjoyed the season. I got what I wanted out of it. Almost everything I wanted out of it. Generally speaking, these delayed revivals don't have the best track record. And I think this one did it right. It worked for me, and it was different enough to justify happening. Same enough to not alienate me or be like, what on earth did you do? So I absolutely recommend it if you're a Justified fan. Let me know your thoughts down below. Keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye.